You have been looking in the wrong place. Not because you are careless. Not because you didn't try. You prepared carefully. You marked the spot. You waited until the right moment. And then you dove with complete confidence into water that hasn't had your answer in it for a very long time. You just didn't know the boat had moved. Gajugujam. Gakjugugum. 4 characters. 1 boat. 1 sword somewhere in a river. And one of the most quietly devastating stories in Korean wisdom about the gap between where you are looking and where the answer actually is. Welcome back to K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. Today, Gajugujam, and a question that might be uncomfortable. Where have you been carving marks on a moving boat? Let's start with the 4 characters. K-gak, to carve, to cut a mark into something solid. Joju, a boat, something that moves through water. Chu-ju, to seek, to search for something. Gngm, a sword, something lost. K-jo-chu-gn, carving the boat to seek the sword. 4 characters. A moving boat. A careful mark. And the most important thing, the man forgot that the mark moves with the boat, but the sword does not. The story comes from Yosi Chunchu, the Lushi Chunchu, a collection of philosophical texts compiled in China around 239 BCE. A man from the state of Chu was crossing a river by boat. He was carrying a sword. A good sword. An important sword. And then somewhere in the middle of the crossing the sword slipped. It hit the edge of the boat. It turned once in the air. And it disappeared into the river. For one moment, the man watched it go. And then he did something that made perfect sense to him. And absolutely no sense at all. He reached into his robe, took out a small knife, and carved a careful mark into the side of the boat right at the exact spot where the sword had gone over the edge. A passenger nearby watched this happening. "What are you doing?" the passenger asked. The man looked up, completely calm. Completely confident. "Marking where my sword fell," he said. "So I know exactly where to look when we reach the other side." The passenger opened their mouth. And then closed it. Because what do you say to that? The logic was internally perfect. The man knew where the sword had gone over. He had marked that spot. He planned to search that spot. There was only one small problem. The boat was moving, and the sword was not. The boat reached the other bank. The man looked at his mark, nodded with satisfaction, and jumped in. He dove. He searched. He felt along the riverbed. Nothing. He came up. Dove again. Still nothing. 3rd time. Nothing. The sword was not there. Of course it was not there. The boat had traveled the full width of the river. The mark had traveled with it. But the sword had entered the water in the middle of the river, and it was still there. Right where it fell, waiting quietly on the riverbed, exactly where it had always been. The man was searching with perfect precision in entirely the wrong place. And he had no idea. This is Gajugujam, and the man was not stupid. That is the most important thing to understand about this story. His mark was accurate. His preparation was careful. His logic was consistent. The only thing he missed was one quiet, obvious, easy to forget fact. The boat moves. The river does not move with it. The mark was correct relative to the boat. But the boat was no longer in the same relationship to the river that it had been when the sword fell. Everything had shifted. The context had changed. And the man, trusting his mark with complete confidence, was looking in water that had never held his sword at all. Gajugujam. The mark is accurate. The world has moved. And the person with the knife is still looking at the mark. Gajugujam was not written as a story about a foolish man and his sword. It was written as a warning to kings. Lu Buwei Yeobulwi in Korean was one of the most powerful men in pre-imperial China. And in Cha Jin, the chapter on observing the present, he used this story to say something specific to the rulers of his time. The boat is time. The river is the world. The sword is what you are looking for: order, prosperity, justice, the thing governance is meant to produce. The laws carved into the boat were made when the boat was somewhere else. Made for a world that has since moved on. And a ruler who governs by yesterday's marks, who trusts the carved systems of a previous era without checking whether the river has shifted, will keep diving into empty water. Governing a kingdom, building a business, managing a relationship, navigating your own life. The principle is the same. The boat is always moving. There is someone else in this story worth thinking about. The passenger. The passenger asked, "What are you doing?" They received the answer. They understood, presumably, what was wrong. And they said nothing more. They watched the man carve the mark. They watched the boat move across the river. They watched the man dive, come up empty, and dive again. And they stayed silent. Maybe it wasn't their place. Maybe they didn't know how to explain it. Maybe they assumed the man would figure it out on his own. Gajugujam is not only about the man with the knife. It is also about every person who saw clearly that the boat had moved and chose not to say so. The most useful thing the passenger could have done was simple. The boat has moved since you made that mark. 6 words. That's all. Sometimes the most important thing we can do for someone is say those 6 words. The boat has moved. Once you know 각주구검, you see it everywhere. The company that built its success on a particular strategy and keeps applying that strategy in a market that has fundamentally shifted. The strategy is still carved into the boat. The market moved 3 years ago. They are diving into water that has been empty for a long time. The person who learned how relationships work from a painful experience and applies those lessons to every person they meet afterward, regardless of whether the new person is anything like the old one. The lesson was real. The lesson was earned. The boat has moved. The professional who developed their approach in a particular environment and keeps applying it as the environment shifts beneath them. The approach worked. It is carved with absolute confidence. The river is somewhere else now. These are not stories about careless people. These are stories about careful people, people who prepared, who learned, who made accurate marks, who forgot that accuracy is always relative to a moment that is now gone. The chapter that contains 각주구검 is called Cha-Jin. Sashi, to observe clearly. Ima, now. The present moment. Observe the present, not the past, not what worked before, not the assumptions you made when the boat was somewhere else. The actual present. What is actually true right now? This is the antidote to 각주구검. Not abandoning your marks, not distrusting everything you have learned, but developing the habit of regularly checking whether the boat has moved since the mark was made. Is this strategy still right for the current situation, or was it right for last year's situation? Is this understanding of this person still accurate, or have they changed and I haven't updated my mark? Is this approach still suited to the world I am actually in, or am I navigating today's river with yesterday's map? Cha-Jin. Observe the present. It sounds simple. Most true things do. Here is the part of 각주구검 that the story contains quietly, the part that is easy to miss when you are focused on the man's mistake. The sword is still there. It did not disappear. It did not become unfindable. It is on the riverbed, exactly where it entered the water, completely intact, waiting. The man has not lost his sword permanently. He has only been looking in the wrong place. And this is true everywhere 각주구검 appears in a life. The thing you are looking for, the solution, the connection, the result, the answer, it is real. It exists. It is findable. You just need to stop looking beneath the mark and start looking at the actual river. Go upstream. Find where the boat actually was. Look at the present water, not the memory of the water. Not the mark. The real river, right now. And dive. The sword is there. Imagine the man had listened to the passenger. Imagine he had stopped for a moment and thought the boat has moved. The sword is not where my mark is pointing. The sword is where the boat was when the sword fell. He would have looked upstream. Found the fixed point on the shore that corresponded to the moment of the fall. Estimated the location. Dove there. And come up with his sword. The same amount of water. The same amount of effort. The same dive. Just pointed at the right river. There are things in your life right now that you have been working on, searching for, trying to reach with genuine effort, genuine preparation, genuine investment. And they are not where you have been looking. Not because the effort was wrong. Because the mark was made when the boat was somewhere else. Cha-Jin. Observe the present. Where is the river now? 각주구검 is not saying trust nothing you have learned. Some marks are made on fixed points. Some understanding holds across all contexts, all years, all changing circumstances. Honesty is still honesty. Kindness is still kindness. The cost of pride, the value of patience, the importance of showing up, these are not marks that expire. What 각주구검 asks is for the practice of discernment. Regularly, quietly, without drama, going back to your marks and asking which ones still point to real water. Not out of anxiety, not out of distrust, out of the same careful observation that made the marks worth making in the first place. Keep what is still true. Update what is not. And when you dive where the sword actually is. That is 각주구검, carving the boat to find the sword. Born 2,300 years ago as a warning to rulers about laws that outlive their usefulness. Carried through Korean and Chinese wisdom across centuries. Still alive today in every strategy that worked before the market moved, every relationship pattern learned in a different river, every approach that made perfect sense in yesterday's water. The boat always moves. This is not a problem. This is simply what boats do. The river always flows. The world always changes. The circumstances that made your mark accurate are always shifting into something slightly different. 각주구검 is not a condemnation. It is an invitation. Look at your marks. Ask when they were made. Check how far the boat has traveled. And then look at the actual river. The present river, where things actually are. Cha Jin, your sword is there. The man in the story never found his sword. Not because the sword was gone. Not because it was unfindable. Not because he didn't try hard enough. Because he trusted his mark more than he trusted the moving river. He walked away from the water that day without what he came for. And somewhere upstream, on the riverbed, his sword was still there. Waiting. It is a small story. One boat, one sword, one carved mark, one man diving into the wrong water with complete confidence. And it has been told for 2,300 years. Because it is not a small story at all. It is the story of every person who has ever been certain they were looking in exactly the right place, while the answer sat quietly elsewhere, waiting to be found by someone willing to observe the present moment. Cha Jin, the boat has moved. Where is your sword? So here are your questions for today. Where is your carved mark? What belief, strategy, or approach did you form carefully and accurately at one moment and have been trusting ever since, without checking whether the boat has moved? And when did you last look at the actual river? Not the memory of the river. Not the assumptions from the last time you checked. The real, present, actual situation as it is right now. The sword is real. It is findable. It is waiting. You just need to know which river to look in. Tell us in the comments. Because Gajugyujam moments, the times we realized we had been looking in the wrong water, are some of the most important moments we have. And sometimes the most quietly funny ones too. Thank you for watching K-Wisdom, where 4 characters hold thousands of years of Korean wisdom. If this stayed with you, if you are thinking about your carved mark right now, please like and subscribe. There are many more 4 characters waiting. See you next time on K-Wisdom.